this time for the report of the President.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Doug and Brandon. I know that both of you contributed an amazing amount, and best of all, I know both of you will continue to contribute. I'm already scheming some work with Doug, and I know Brandon is a deep part of our university community as a student and staff member. I want to thank, this is an irregular meeting in the sense that it was not scheduled here. So thank you to Maynette and the entire team for hosting us on short notice. These aren't the easiest meetings to endure, so we appreciate it. But I hope also, Regents, while you're here, you can take this opportunity. Those of you who have not had a chance, you can see the beautiful new Administration and Health Science building, which is up and running. It is the newest building in the UH system right now. And you can also see the mound of dirt and equipment associated with our most recent groundbreaking, which is the new creative media building on site. So you can poke around if we get a break or end early. A few matters to update on. One, you were very helpful, Regents, in supporting the community college accreditation process. I'm happy to report that the ACCJC, as we call them, at its January meeting, took the following actions regarding the 6 UH community colleges that they accredit. Remember that Maui is accredited by the WASC Senior Commission because it offers multiple applied baccalaureate degrees. First, they approved reaffirmation of accreditation for the full 7 years for Hawaii Community College, Honolulu Community College, Kauai Community College, and Windward. So that's 4 out of the 6. They approved reaffirmation of accreditation for 7 years for Leeward Community College with a follow-up report required to address one compliance recommendation relating to establishing a regular review cycle for evaluating the college's policies. They approved reaffirmation of accreditation for 18 months for Kapiolani Community College with a follow-up report and visit required to address 2 compliance recommendations. The first was related to regular review and evaluation of the governance structures and policies, and the second was to better analyze and use the results of the assessments of student learning outcomes in the planning and resource allocation on campus. So under federal regulations, compliance recommendations must be addressed within 2 years. In Leeward's case, the non-compliance was judged to be relatively easy to remedy, and the report that they submit will verify that compliance within a 2-year period. In Kapiolani's case, the effort to develop a more robust assessment system for student learning outcomes is more substantial, and the Commission wants to be sure the college is in compliance within the 2-year time frame. So they will have a follow-up visit when they submit the report. This is usually a 1 or 2-person team that validates the report, then submits a recommendation to the Commission, and at that point, reaffirmation would presumably be extended to the full 7 years. All of the colleges received several commendations and some additional recommendations for improvement. And the Commission also found full compliance with all of the standards relating to board governance and the community college system governance and leadership. So thank you all, board members. A couple times we've asked you to do things and have had to explain to you this is for purposes of complying with community college accreditation requirements, and you have been amazingly successful in your duties.
David, I'd like to say this represents the very high quality of our community colleges and the work of all of the faculty, staff, and administrators involved. I'd especially like to ask Vice President Norton to convey the board's appreciation for their work, and that it's really very gratifying to see it affirmed by the external accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to highlight 2 exciting new offerings, academic offerings. So at the last meeting, you actually approved 2 new programs. That was the BS in Aeronautical Science at UH Hilo, and also the BS in Engineering Science at UH Mānoa, with tracks in aerospace engineering and biomedical engineering. The two programs I'll mention now are not activities that require board approval because they are existing degree programs. First is the extension of the Maui ABIT degree, the Applied Baccalaureate in Information Technology, online to Kapiolani Community College as the first partner. This is something we've talked about when you've reviewed the numbers for small programs, and we talked about the opportunity for this program in particular to expand beyond the island of Maui with online offerings to other islands, and indeed that has now been announced. In this case, students can get an Associate of Arts in IT from Kapiolani, followed by moving into the ABIT online offerings from Maui College. So thanks to Chancellors Louis and Louise for putting that together. But most of the buzz we've had this year has been the announcement of our new online Associate of Arts degree. We have always offered most of the courses, but what we're doing differently is we are assembling this into a program designed specifically for returning adults. We've talked a little bit, this will be the special format of 5-week online courses. You take one at a time and proceed directly through the program. In the first day of the announcement, we got over 500 inquiries that all have to be followed up on. And I'm happy to report it's actually one of our PELP graduates, our President's Emerging Leader Program graduates, who is coordinating the program and responding to those. The courses are offered by all of our community colleges online, and the degree will actually be awarded by Leeward Community College. And we are also now developing 4-year baccalaureate completion programs that, again, designed for adults. Those will be in similar formats from UH Mānoa, UH Hilo. We have social work is ready to launch. We're also working on social sciences. And of course, all of the course offerings of UH West Oʻahu, which has actually the highest percentage of online courses of any of our campuses, those are also available to students who complete the AA online. So the legislature supported this initiative. We were very happy last session, and we already have these announcements coming out of their support. And I want to thank Vice President Morton, Vice President Straney, Tammy Chun, who I did not see here this morning, who's been helping, Hei Okimoto, who is looking forward to her appearance at the Senate Higher Education Committee and is not here at this meeting today. But we've really had a strong team assembling this, and I think we're already starting to see results that will serve the people of Hawaii much better. A couple of you have asked about the impact of the government shutdown, partial shutdown on the university, and this primarily impacts us in our research enterprise. I want to highlight a couple of awards because, as you know, it was only a partial shutdown. We had an amazing $10.4 million grant to our young C. Maiki cohort at UH Mānoa. This is a group of young faculty focused on the microbiome from across the campus. Vice Chancellor Bruno has made an investment in this group. They're being mentored by some great scientists, and they're already coming up on their own and producing this kind of opportunity for just really stunning and transformational research. We got a great award for wave energy testing that I think is a kind of opportunity, $1.4 million to look at some of that technology and how to actually deploy it. And we just announced that our Pan-STARRS program on Maui, that is the telescope that many of you saw, that's the sky survey instrument at the top of Haleakala, that is part of the largest sky survey ever. They have produced 1.6 petabytes of data. So if you think of a gigabyte times 1,000 times 1,000, they actually had to send most of this over on ships because the networks aren't fast enough yet. But we're working on that as well. It is the largest volume of astronomical information ever released, and we're hosting it on the mainland, actually, at the Space Science Technology Institute. 30,000 times the content of Wikipedia, 15 times the volume of the Library of Congress, if you want to think about how much it is. Back to the shutdown. We know of no employees directly affected by the furloughs here within the university, and none of our projects were reported to have been put in a stop work situation, as took place at some institutions on the mainland when their federal partners were unavailable. UH managed the direct financial impacts with no hiccups. So we perform most of our research, we fund it, we bill the federal government after the fact. For us, the agencies that were affected by the partial shutdown represent about 30% of our total extramural support. So it was not our whole federal funding pipeline, our extramural pipeline, which is approaching $400 million a year. We continue to be reimbursed by the agencies that were open. That's NIH, National Cancer Institute, DOD, and even some of the agencies that were closed had automated online systems running. That includes NASA and U.S. Department of Agriculture. And through their online systems, they would reimburse us for approved expenses that we incurred. The agencies that were closed that were not reimbursing were National Science Foundation, Department of Commerce and its sub-agencies, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Interior. For us, that amounted to an accounts receivable concern of about $7 million, $5 million from NSF. And most of that was payroll, so we kept paying people. Our PIs did pull back on discretionary equipment purchases and expenses so as to try to keep from accruing a very large AR where possible, but I'm happy to report that the UH and RCUH reserves were more than adequate to face that challenge. We're now working to catch up on the reimbursements, unfortunately, before the next possible shutdown. And it should be noted that the previous shutdowns were shorter, but they were impactful in the sense that they, in some cases, the entire federal government shut down. So it was actually more agencies, though for a shorter period of time. Our biggest concern is really the impact on the pipeline of contracts and grants for this year and moving forward. During the shutdown, the impacted agencies, they made no new awards, they issued no new solicitations, there can be no review panels, so that is likely to impact us, particularly if they go back into shutdown mode on our numbers and the activities of our faculty this fiscal year. Hopefully this will all even out over time, but we may see some significant blips in the numbers. We know that in many agencies the staff are doing their best to catch up in these 3 weeks, but there's only so much that they can do. But we are already seeing declines in the increase of what were looking like really strong improvements over last fiscal year. It is highly possible that the increases that were well over 10% before the shutdown may either flatten or even potentially reduce. We'll just have to see how that shakes out. And of course, the success of the committee that's working to avoid the next shutdown is paramount. Great sustainability news for us on this island. Biki has come to UH, so we get to see the little blue bikes around our campuses. We have 6 Biki stops at UH Mānoa, 3 Biki stops around Kapiolani Community College, and as you've probably noticed around town, they're a little slow to get going, but we're already starting to see blue bikes popping around our campuses, as you see up and down town and in the bike lanes. One of the areas that the board has asked us to focus on more strongly is around real estate development and monetization of our properties. Some of this was shared with the P&F committee, but just so the full board is aware, I want to make sure you understand that within the administration, we had talked about continuing on the current projects, and by the end of this academic year, coming up with a new structure. We actually beat that deadline, and working with primarily Vice Presidents Gouveia and Young, we have now stood up our first strategic partnerships office. It consists of 3 people, 1 existing person, 1 vacancy associated with a person who retired who was working in this area, and 1 new position that was appropriated by the legislature last year. That will be a new office reporting to Vice President Young that will focus on our strategic partnerships and monetization. Vice President Gouveia will continue to hold responsibility for campus plans, so that is long-range development plans and the like. There will be significant overlap and intersection between those 2 points. And I do meet weekly with both vice presidents together where we look at those areas and make sure that we're all updated on both of those. I should mention that Vice President Young, welcome, has resigned from the HART board to avoid any potential or perceived conflicts of interest in our relationships with them. One of our hot projects right now is the Atherton Y. As we have reported previously, we have pivoted from the original plan to develop it strictly as dorms, essentially as is, and are instead positioning it as an exciting innovation hub where we hope to create some premium housing for students very interested in innovation from across the campus. We're partnering with the UH Foundation in a new way. They have issued the RFP for partners. We have 6 pre-qualified developers in play, all of whom have the financial capacity to develop and operate the project at their expense. The responses to those RFPs are due March 7th, with interviews following, and the consultant managing that process for us together was engaged by the UH Foundation fully with private funds. So we will continue to keep you posted as that goes along, and we have an active working group with the consultant, the foundation, and university staff. In addition, on this side of the island, we are in active discussions, as Vice President Gouveia has updated you. We are back in play with the opportunity potentially to develop a major utility scale PV project on the Mauka lands just up above us here. We're working with the developer who's finalizing their due diligence before we get into the financial discussions. We are very optimistic that that will bear fruit, both generating revenue for the university and also helping us achieve our net zero target goal of 2035. We have previously also talked with you about the Lēʻahi properties. We did have a relationship with the state, which was very interested in developing a veterans care facility. They have bypassed that site. They determined that it was going to be too difficult for them to proceed with that project as stated in the time frame they needed, and they have informally and will formally notify us that they no longer have interest in that site. And probably the most interesting new opportunity, some of you will have noticed that St. Francis School has announced they are ceasing high school operations. They are still considering whether they will be able to continue primary school operations. We are in direct conversation with them about opportunities for that property, which directly abuts the UH Mānoa campus toward the rear. It's a pretty interesting property. It would also be extremely difficult for someone else to develop given the nature of the traffic and just the configuration of the property. It isn't so much that we have an immediate need for that, but in the spirit of thinking of universities as institutions that endure for decades and centuries, that is a property that, in my view, the university should seek over the very long term to integrate into UH Mānoa in some fashion. And we have a number of ideas for how it might be used, and we're looking at how we might finance some of those without going to the legislature at this point. That is not our plan. As I start wrapping up, I want to say something about planning for all of these activities. As we sit here on this campus, it's particularly noteworthy to think about the second decade project. That was a planning initiative around the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe that really looked at what did the university need to do in the second decade of this century, that is 2010 to 2020. The most notable outcome of that study was that the 2 regions of this state that were most underserved with public higher education were the West Oʻahu, Leeward, Central Oahu, North Shore area of this island, and West Hawaii on the island of Hawaii. And what is remarkable, we often think of our plans as being something that gets put on the shelf. As a direct result of that plan, we now have this campus prioritized, constructed, and in operation, and we have the Palama Nui campus of Hawaii Community College in operation and serving students. So we are now about to begin planning under Vice President Straney's leadership for what we'll call the Third Decade Project, to begin looking at a very high level about the state's needs around social, economic, educational needs through 2030. And we believe that's the kind of information we'll need to develop the next set of strategic directions. So let me close with a short video. Kaiu Kimura, who many of you met at UH Hilo, she's the director of the Imiloa Astronomy Center, was a keynote speaker at the American Astronomical Society in Seattle last month. She spoke to 2,000 astronomers, and she talked about this particular project, which, well, let me let the video speak for itself. It's about 5 minutes. Yeah. You know, pretty inspiring. So those two names created by those students on Hawaii Island have been submitted to the IAU, which is the official body that gives objects names. And I want to thank our colleagues on Maui. These were both discovered at Pan-STARRS, and normally the discoverer gets to name them, but the Pan-STARRS team decided to let this be the initial pilot project for Ahehua Inoa. And this is the work of many, so you heard Kaiu, Larry Kimura from Kahakaula, Doug Simons is the director of the Canada-France Hawaii Telescope, and a lot of the inspiration for this actually came from John DeFries, a well-known Big Island resident. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my President's report.